YouTube. Welcome to today's exciting live stream with Nick Diego and Ryan Welcher, two superstars of the WordPress game, pro developers. I'm not going to say very much today. I'm operating things in the background. I'm just going to double check we are actually live. Yeah, we are actually live. So I'm going to hand over to Nick. But if you have any questions, please start your questions with #Q in the live chat. And if you could give the video a thumbs up, that'd be amazing because it really helps spread the word. Right, I'm going to evacuate the scene and pass over to Nick. Good luck, everyone. See you later.
Thanks, Jamie. Welcome, everybody. So today we're going to have a fun live stream where we're going to put Ryan to the test here. And we're going to basically build a block within 45 minutes. And the idea behind this presentation is to kind of show you how you can build your first block and hopefully kind of to demystify some of the complexities around building blocks in WordPress, which has become kind of a fundamental skill set that to work with modern WordPress, the block editor, block themes, that sort of thing. So we're going to kick it over to Ryan, and he's going to build a really cool block and show us also some resources that you can use after the fact to start on your own block building journey. Hopefully you come away feeling that blocks are not as complicated as you may have thought to build. And both Ryan and I, we are developer advocates. We are here to support the community, building all things in WordPress. And so if you have any questions, please add them in the chat. And of course, we're in the community around to answer questions afterwards. So without further ado, giving Ryan all the time he needs. Take it away, Ryan. Let's see what you can do.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you, Nick. You just burned 2 minutes of my 45. I appreciate you for that. Thank you. So today we're going to be building something that is a block that's actually interesting and fun. Now, if I just wanted to build a block quickly, your first Hello World block, we could have this done with a simple command, which we're going to see in a second, but that's boring to look at. So this is what we're going to try to build today. This is this is like what I'm calling a Polaroid generator block. So what this does is these images, it's pulling from a third-party API. It generates that. So this is what it looks like on the homepage of 2025 theme, and this is what we're going to have hopefully by the end of the live stream. In the admin, we have the option to choose the amount of photos that we want, and we can pick a background color. And so if we save that, just refresh this, you can see a horrible yellow color. So right, okay, so let's talk about getting started. So the first thing that you're going to want to do is head over to developer.wordpress.org /block editor and go to the getting started section. So everything that I'm going to be going over relatively fast in this stream today is all available here. So and you can do a deep dive into many of the things that I'm probably just going to be able just to touch on briefly. So go there, check it out. There are 3 things that you're going to need to get started building a block. Now, you're going to need some kind of code editor, which I'm using VS Code. You need Node and the Node tools. The version numbers and everything are all in here. I highly recommend using something called NVM, Node Version Manager, which you can install to quickly switch between versions of Node. And then, of course, you're going to need some kind of local development environment. So there are all these things are listed here. There is no development tools, and then there's local WordPress environments. There's a ton available. There isn't a wrong one. Use whatever you're comfortable with. But anyways, okay. So let's start building. That's probably the best way to do it. So I have a repo set up here, and what I'm going to start with is one of my favorite tools in the world. It's called the Create Block tool. And I'm just going to zoom in here. So it is a command line tool, and that you call just like this. I'm just going to, if you've ever seen me do anything live before, I cannot type. So this is all you need to do to start this. So Create Block, it's like I said, it's a Node tool. It's a scaffolding tool. It runs in 2 modes. One, you can run it in one of 2 modes. One's called interactive mode, which I'll quickly demo here. So when you run this, it's the tool is going to ask you a series of questions about the block that you're trying to make. You can enter these values. You can take the default values, and if I just kind of skip through it, it'll start to scaffold a block. And we can, if we see over here, we've got, what do they call this thing? Example dynamic block. So this is building a block out for me. And that's going to give me all the files I need, all the build process I need, everything that I need just to get started. I'm going to just quickly cancel that and get rid of this because we don't need it. The second mode is what's called quick mode. So it's basically the same thing, except it skips all of those questions. And you can trigger that mode by simply passing what's referred to as the slug. So I'm going to say my first, I will get better at typing, I promise. My first block. And what this is going to do is it's going to bypass all of that stuff and just start building you or scaffolding out the files. And what you actually get is a WordPress plugin with a single file, or sorry, a single block that is available to start working on. So again, I'm going to just cancel that. We'll get rid of this because I have some other examples here. There are two types of blocks that you can scaffold. One's called a static block and one's called a dynamic block. So I encourage you to go to the documentation and read more in depth on those. But the fundamental difference is that a static block saves its output into the post content, whereas a dynamic block renders that in real time on via PHP. So there's trade-offs and pros and cons to both. If you're trying to do something that has to access the server to display something, then a dynamic block is probably the better solution there. As a developer, dynamic blocks are much easier to work with when it comes to iterations. When you have to change markup and do all of these things, static blocks require certain other steps that dynamic blocks don't. We'll talk about that if and when I get to the broken section on how to debug. So what we're going to do is we're going to build out our own block using quick mode, and it's, of course. So this is going to build a new block called Polaroid generator, and we're going to do we're going to pass the variant flag, which is telling create block that we want to build a dynamic block. So when I run this, we should get our Polaroid generator inside of here. And while that's building, I can take a look at some of the structure in here. So this is going to build out as it's going, because what it does is it gives me a package JSON file, which explains, which provides all of the scripts and all the packages and everything that my plugin is going to use. It gives me the initial like the plugin file that is what's loading our block and doing all of that. It loads node modules for us. We have an editor config file, get ignore, package JSON, readme, all that sort of stuff. And then it actually will generate all of our block files inside a src directory. The most important one being block.json, which I'll get into in a little bit more detail as we go along. But these are the files that make up a block. And you can think of them like this. The index file is sort of the entry point. It's the main file that references everything. So inside our index, you'll actually see a register block type call. And then our edit.js is the block editor instance. So when you're editing this block inside of WordPress, this is what you're interfacing with, the contents of this particular file. This if we were doing a static block, we would have a save.js in here because that's what is used to generate the markup that is then saved to the database when you hit save. But because we're using a dynamic block, we have this PHP file called render.php, and this is what's running. This is what runs to render the output of our block on the front end. And then we have a couple of style sheets in here, specifically Sass files. One's for styles. This is like for the front end, and this is for the editor. And we'll show how those become important in a second. And then we have our build directory, and our build directory is all of the files that have been compiled and sent out. And these are the ones that actually get enqueued by our block.json file and loaded on the front end. So I don't think there's any questions or anything, but so let's talk a bit about the build process. So the build process is baked in. You don't need to do anything with it. It work. It's based on Webpack and it supports Babel or Babel, whatever you want to call it, but it allows us to transpile our React and our JSX stuff into JavaScript that all browsers can understand. It handles SAS files. It does a lot of stuff for us behind the scenes, and we don't have to worry about messing with it. It's just there for us. And so there's two commands that we can run. The start command is sort of your watch. So when you run start, you're going to it's going to go into watch mode, and anytime you make a change to any of your files, the files will get recompiled, and then you can see them in the browser. The files that you see are actually that's a build. Let me just show you the difference. So I'm just going to cd into my Polaroid generator. I'm going to say, and I'm going to run npm run start. Start is like our development build. I'm just going to hide this so we don't see it. So you can see, I'm just showing this for edification. I don't even know what it all does, but this is sort of like all the Webpack stuff that comes out. So this is like your development build. You can see that we have some mapping, like some map files. So if you do run into errors in the console, it can point to where that is. So it's really great for development. But when you go to deploy your block, you're going to want to run the build, because the build is going to give you the production ready code. So if we look at this, you can see it's all like it's minified and obfuscated and made very, 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 very small. So it's very important to understand the difference between those commands. The best thing about it is that you don't have to make any changes. Webpack will just output the file in the same location with the same name, and the contents just become different. So you don't have to like enqueue a different file for production than you do for local development. Okay, so enough of that shenanigans. Let's start building something. So we are going to start with updating our edit component, I think. So let's take a look at what our edit component looks like. So in here, well, first of all, let's run our start. npm, can you see that? Okay, run start. So we're going to run our start. So this is our watch. We're just going to let that run in the background. So this is all we have going on right now. So if we tab over to the browser, I'm going to just make sure that this is active. I'm going to deactivate the other one. And then let's get a post in here, add a new post, and we're gonna Polaroid generator. So this is the default scaffold that we get when we run create block. So it's kind of boring, doesn't do anything for us, and that's why if we just stopped at this point, you'd probably all walk away going, wow, this is like super compelling. So we're going to change all this. So what we're going to do is we're going to jump back in here, and then I'm just going to, for the sake of time, I'm going to copy and paste a bunch of code, but I will talk us through it. So that's it. So the first thing that I'm going to do is clean some of this stuff up, because just for the sake of us looking at it, it'll be much easier if we just get rid of a lot of these comments. There's nothing wrong with these comments, but just for the sake of demonstration. So these we're importing from various WordPress packages that we're going to use. So the first thing that we need to really understand is the use block props hook. This is super important, and it needs to wrap the outermost item of your edit component. And what it's going to do is it's going to apply all the classes and all the things that the block editor needs to be able to make the block selectable, to be able to assign classes to it, to be able to pick colors and align it and do all that stuff. So it just has to be there. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Give me 1 second, because this drives me nuts. I want to make sure I have my prettier config. This is just, pay no attention to this part. This is just me being OCD about my there we go. I just wanted to match WordPress standards. So if we were to just go ahead and change this and say hi, and we refresh this now, you can see that we've changed that. So we're good to go. So let's look at what we're building. So this thing is going to be a bunch of basically images wrapped in some CSS. And so what I have set up is I have basically set up some HTML, which will look a bit like this. Sorry, let me jump back over here. So we're going to change this. This is going to become a section tag. And this can be anything that you want it to be. I'm just decided to make it a section tag for the purposes of this demo. All right. Oh. Save. And then inside of that, I'm going to have a div with the class name of Polaroids. And I'm just going to paste that in there. And then we're going to add some fun stuff in here. So I just want to point this out, that this is your first time working with JSX, which is what this is. If you're completely unfamiliar with what you're looking at right now, that is because it is called JSX. And JSX is a sort of an HTML, it's like an HTML extension, HTML language extension sort of, that was built by Facebook for React. And it allows us to do nested HTML style nodes like this. It's very, very readable, but you can't just plunk this into any JavaScript. You have to have a transpiler working, which is what our build process provides, in order to turn that into something that browsers understand. But it's very, very readable. So that's what this is. But there's a couple of trade-offs. First of all, class. When you want to assign a class to an item, we have to use class name, not class itself, because class is a reserved word in JavaScript. Anyways, so that's the first thing. Yeah, so I'm going to have a div in there called that. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to steal a little helper function that I wrote, because what we're doing is we're going to take these we're taking images from pixum.photo. So it's like it's random images. So I've built all this. Basically what it's doing is it's going to take a number that we're going to provide via an attribute, and it's going to pull that many photos and just randomly show that many in this list. So I've built this out. That's all we really need to worry about that right now. And then so in the Polaroids down here, we're just going to run this. So this is, because we're in JSX here, these little parentheses or curly braces, I should say, is telling JSX that we're going to run some code inside of that. So this is going to run the render photos function, and it's going to take photos. Now that's not going to work right now because we haven't set photos up. But if I were just to hit 6 right there, come back over here, where was I? Right here. Refresh this. You can see I've got 6 photos pulling in. Looks horrible, but I've got those coming in. So I think what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to control this number via the block inspector. So if I were to select this block over here, it'd be really great if we had the ability to say, I want to show 6 photos, I want to show 10 photos, whatever that is. Well, lucky for you, we already have that code. So I'm going to switch back over here, and I'm going to talk about I'm going to talk about adding an attribute, and then we'll talk about building the control. So we haven't really looked at block.json yet. Block.json is the implementation schematic, if you will, for the block. It tells us the block name. It tells us what category it sits in, what icon it's going to use, what it supports. And these all represent different files that get in queued. So the editor script is basically the index that we're going to use. So that's loading the main block. We have an editor style that pulls in editor only CSS. We have style that pulls in the main CSS file. And then we have render, and render tells it what the render .php to use. Now we can change these file names, and then ViewScript actually will target this, and it will load it on the front end. So what we need to do is we need to keep track of the number of photos that this block is going to display. So we can do that by adding an attributes. And so our attribute is going to be, I think, photos, right? And it's an object, and we're going to say it's going to need a type. So what is the data type of this? And in our case, it's going to be a number. And then I can't remember if I had a default or not. And then you can actually set a default value. So we're going to set a default value of 6. So now that this has been defined, we need to access it in our code. So to do that, this edit component is passed an attribute, a variable called props. Or it's called whatever you want, but it's an object of things. But the nomenclature in React is to call it props. So we want to be able to access certain things inside of that. So I'm going to use what's called object destructuring. So there's two ways that you could do it. You could do something like this. You could say const, right? Attributes. Sorry, we're going to say I want to get the attributes. I can type it. Attributes from props, right? And then I also want to get the photos from attributes. So this is called object destructuring. So what this is basically saying is in the props object, just pull out and give me the attributes property, but as a variable name, and then do the same thing with photos. Now we can do this in line. So we can actually do it inside of here. So I can just say, give me attributes like that, and then I can do away with this, right? So then I have access to attributes here, and I can pull in photos, and I'm going to pass photos there. And so if I refresh this, we should still get 6 because that was the default. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Perfect. Okay. So I'm just going to keep going, but if there's questions, I'm happy to come back and revisit this stuff. So attributes isn't the only thing that's passed. There's a lot of things that there is actually a function that allows us to set attributes, which is going to be really, really important when we want to introduce a control to change this value from the default value to whatever we want it to be. So I'm going to destructure it out there so it's available to us. Now we're not using it yet, but we're going to start building out the control. So the place where I want to put this is right here, and it's called the inspector sidebar. So what I'm going to use is the inspector controls component that is found in the block editor package. So this is going to be pretty common you want to import something from a package. So this inspector controls is how we can insert our own things into that sidebar. So, and what's fun about this is you can put it anywhere. And it doesn't get, I'm going to just delete this because we don't need this. I'm going to replace that with inspector controls. So this can go anywhere. It doesn't actually get rendered in the edit of the block. It gets rendered on the sidebar. So you can put this anywhere and it won't affect your block itself. So if I just type the word content in here, we can take a quick look. And if I grab this now, so you can see I've got this little content over here, which looks horrible. So we're going to make it better by we're going to use another component called panel body, which is in the components package. So I'm just going to grab this. And actually, we're going to use two components. The first thing we're going to use is panel body. Panel body is going to make it look nicer inside of this thing, like this. And then I'm going to put a range control. So range control is just a slider. And these are all these are all components that are provided with WordPress. Like I haven't built any custom components here. What I'm going to do is just copy and paste this into here, and then I will explain everything that we're looking at. So we have this range control component. It takes a label. The label is going to be photos. I should actually be doing this slightly differently because we want to be able to mark our strings for translation. So we're going to say photos, and then you would we're going to add. So this is the I18N package. This is basically going to say that this string is available for translation at this text domain. So we have the value. The value is going to be whatever the value of photos is. So by default, it's 6. But if we change it, it'll be whatever that value is. This onChange function is going to give us the new value as we're changing the slider. And then this accepts a function. This onChange property takes a function. That function receives whatever the new photo count is going to be. And then we're going to set attributes on this block. We're going to set the photos attribute to whatever the new count is. So set attributes takes an object of attribute keys and values. And then that's how it gets set. And then I'm saying I want a minimum of 3 and a maximum of 12. And then this is just in place because there's some deprecations going on currently. And so having this in there is going to make it not yell at me. It just has to do with styling and the way the styling's moving forward. So let's take a look. Okay, so grab this. We'll select this. Okay, so we have this this photos now. So as I slide this, you can see the photos are now, there's more of them and less of them. Yay! Cool. All right, so that's the fundamentals on the edit. We don't really have much more that we have to do here. So now we can start cleaning it up. We can start talking about how the CSS works. And we're gonna have one more control, but we're gonna add this control via the block.json because there are controls that you can get access to without really writing much code, and I'll show you that now. How many for time? 26. Okay, I feel like I'm going. I feel like I'm doing okay. All right, so let's jump back over here. So block.json, we're going to jump back into there. So in our supports property of block.json, there's a lot of things that could go in here. So I encourage you to go over to developer.wordpress.org to check out the documentation around this, specifically around the supports. But I'm going to add two new properties. I'm going to add this one, which is what you can't see yet, which is the align. And so what this is going to do is this sets the alignment options for this particular block. Is my audio? Oh. My audio good? Okay, sorry, I saw someone in the chat say lost audio. Anyways, so if I were to refresh this, I'm going to save this. I'm going to refresh this. I'm going to grab this. So now you can see that I have two options. I have no alignment, which is the default option. Then I have max width, and then I have full width. So this is going to depend on the theme that you have set up and those values and stuff. But now I can opt into that just by using the align wide, the align full option here. Now there's other options, the line left, line right, but I figured for this one we probably don't need those. And it's my block, so I'll do what I want. The next one is color, because I want to be able to set a background color for this. So color takes a number of other properties, but what I want is background, and I want to set it to true. Now, if I do this, this is what happened in the I'm just going to show you what this looks like. Now, I think we have to actually go in and explicitly turn something off, but we'll show that in a second. So you notice we now have this styles tab showing up here. We didn't have that before. So if I click on this, you can see that I have text, or sorry, I have background, which is what I wanted, but I have text too, which I didn't want that. I didn't ask for that, but that's because text is turned on by default. So when you come in and you enable color, text is going to be there automatically. So what we actually have to do is come in and say, I don't want text, and we'll set that to false, right? And so if I come back here now, it's prompting me to say, because I never save it whenever I make a change here, but if we come over here, now we just have the background color. So you might be wondering, well, where are those colors coming from? These are defined by the theme. So we can actually, so this block is aware of the theme and what its default colors are, which is great, because now you're just integrating completely with theme without having to define a bunch of colors and do all of that stuff. So I'm going to put this, whatever color this is. I'm colorblind, so it looks pinkish to me, but it probably isn't. Who knows? Cool. So if we look at this on the front end, that's not the button I want to press. You can see we still don't have much going on in here yet, but we'll get to that. So the next step, it's probably a good time to get there. Oh no, let's add the CSS. So on here, it's not looking all that great here. So what we want to do is we have two CSS files, and the first CSS file is imported at the index level right here. So the way that the build process works is whenever you import, in this case, SAS files, it actually detects those and exports them out and as separate files. So I'm just going to plunk a bunch of CSS in here. It might look a little daunting, but it is just a bunch of CSS. So I'm just going to plunk this in. Take us through it real quick. This is just basically setting up the grid. This is setting up our little tape that we saw. This is just more about how that's set up. I have a loader and an image and a bunch of stuff in here that we'll get to in a second. And this is setting up some animation. I apologize for having to glance over it so quickly, but we just don't have time to go through it in depth. But now that I've added that, if I refresh this, it didn't work. That's fun. Let's see. All right. It's weird. Oh, because my class name is wrong. That'll do it every single time. So I built this with a different name, and I think the name it's called is what is it? Sorry, Polaroid generator, I believe. Polaroid. So I think there we go. So that did it. Okay, so we can see that there's an issue in here. I know what the issue is, but it's not clear because well, for reasons I'll explain in a second. But basically, I need to do this for now. That should do it. That did, yeah. So this is now it's popping in. It's allowing us to do all this. So we've basically built the admin side, except for one step, which I will explain in a moment. So let's take a look at the front end. So again, if we look at the front end, we see, okay, well, we've definitely got something different going on here. And the reason is because we haven't updated our render.php. Now, I'm fully aware how frustrating it can be to have to update markup in two places. And that's just kind of the way it is right now, the current state of things. And so, yeah, it's a bummer, but we kind of have to do it. So let me just kind of pull, I'm going to just copy all the code in and I'm going to explain it all. We're just going to do that. So what we're doing here is, so render.php has access to three sort of global variables that get added. There is attributes, which is the block attributes. There is content, which is if you're using inner blocks, any content that this block has. If you're not familiar with inner blocks, just don't worry about it right now. And then the third one is block. So the instance of the block itself. So what I'm doing here is I'm pulling off the photos attribute from the attributes array and calling it photos. And then this is matching our section tag here. I'm just going to kind of compare it. So we have a section tag and we have this use block props. Well, the PHP version of that is get block wrapper attributes. So we need to have that. Otherwise it won't get the classes and stuff it needs. Then I'm just mirroring this. So I have my div with the class name of Polaroids, right? And so I have this in here. Now I'm just doing a for loop in PHP where I'm taking the length of photos and I'm just adding a Polaroid class, which is exactly what's happening up here. The class name Polaroid. This key thing is very important to understand in React. When you have looped items, they need to have unique identifiers. For the React purists in the room, I do realize that using the index from a for loop is not the best way of doing it, but I'm not ordering or changing these, so I'm not too worried about it. And then we're just going to like pull in the image itself, and I'm doing some adding query bars and stuff like that. So if we were to take this now and put this on the front end, we now have the same. Now the images won't be the same because it's random every time on the front end and the back end, but we now have basically one-to-one. So, but what I don't like is that horrible little, when it pops in. I'm not a big fan of that. So let's add, let's fix that first. And we can fix that by adding basically a JavaScript and animation on the front end. So I have this view script here, not that one. That has nothing in it. So I wrote this little loader. Well, when I say wrote, I meant stole from the internet. And basically what this is going to do is this is going to look for any image, any class of Polaroid with an image inside of it. It's going to get those images. We're going to create a little div, add the class of loader. We're going to add it before. And then when that image is finished, we're going to just add a new class called loaded. And then we're going to add, then I have some CSS that's going to make that look nice. So this is being added in Vue.js. And if you remember, this Vue script property will load the Vue.js file on the front end. So if I refresh this now, it didn't work. Why didn't it work? Why didn't it work? I think I need to do this. Oh, I wonder if it's because of the CSS. Stand by. I'm just going to change this to white and black. I was doing this with another theme, so I think that might be part of it. No, didn't work. Okay, so this is interesting. So now let's do a bit of debugging so we can see nothing seems to be wrong there. Is it loading the view script properly? Ooh, that might do it. Let's see. There we go. So I think it was just the colors that I picked, but you see how there's like that does that. So what I also want to do is should be fading in. It's not though. Let's take a look. So Polaroid. Yep, it absolutely is. It always happens. It always breaks. It never works. What is that being? Okay. I have some CSS that's conflicting. I might just turn that off because it's more important to me that it fades in nicely. There we go. So that's just because I'm bad at CSS. So basically, now we have this working thing. It's got a nice little loaded animation. There is a zoom in there that I'm going to just or a transform that I'm just going to turn off because I got it working yesterday and now it's not working. So, but yes, so there's a little like overlay effect of slightly it's slightly the opacity is lower. Cool. But if we load this, what's going on here? Well, if we remember in our CSS, and this is really in the weeds, but in our CSS, we are setting the default opacity for the image to be 0. So we're not seeing it. But we want that for the front end, but we certainly don't want that on the back end because we don't have this JavaScript loading. And really, you really don't need those sort of like complex, well, it's not really that complex, but those animations don't really make sense in the back end. So that's where editor.css can really help. So style.css is loaded on the front end and on the back end. So those styles go in both places, but editor.css only gets loaded on the back end. So what we can do is I can just come back in here and I can target. And this is I have to fix the class name right there. So it's going to target the images and set the opacity to 1. And if I've done my job right, we still get that popping in, but it's the back end. So I'm not too worried about that. But now that's working on the back end and it's working on the front end. And we have a working block. How much time? I think I have about 7 minutes. Should I go through my? I'd like to show some debugging in a sort of contrived state, so we can see some debugging techniques. So I'm just going to dive into that, or should we pause for questions on this? Or sure, okay. So I'm going to set this up a little bit. I have a broken plugin. And then so when we're debugging, there's lots of things that happen, and I don't know where I'm clicking, but I will get there. I'm sorry. So we have okay. I'm going to deactivate this plugin. So I've got this plugin in my code right here. It's called broken because it's supposed to be broken. And so the first I let's just pretend I've just scaffolded this block and it's ready to go, and I want to load it. So the block is called, what's it called? It's called, no, sorry, not there. I'm just going to get the name of it. So it's called debugging block. So so when I go into the block editor, I should be able to, sorry, bear with, I should be able to, debug it, right? I should be able to do this and say, oh, and get my block showing up, but it's not showing up. So what? Okay, so the first place I look every time is I go into my inspector controls. I'm going to zoom that in so we can see it a little bit. I'm using Chrome, but there are, I think most modern browsers have a way to inspect sources. So what I want to look at is I want to say, I want to look to see what's being included in here. Yeah. And I don't see Why is this thing doing that? That's weird. So like I'm not seeing anything being in queued. So that the first thing it tells me is that that's a problem because my files aren't being in queued. So as silly as it sounds, the first place I always look is did I turn the plugin on? Because I have done this a million times. I've scaffolded a block with like a plugin with a block and not enabled it, and then be like, it spent like an hour trying to figure out why my JavaScript wasn't working. So let's just do that. So we've activated the block. So if I refresh this now, we can say, okay, well, this is still not loading. I still don't see anything being in queued. So let's check the next step. So the next step is, did we run the build? Because without the build files, there's nothing to in queue. And if I look in here, you can see I don't have a build directory. So that's a problem. So I'm going to say npm run. I'm just going to run start and put it in the start. And so that's going to run. It's going to do its thing. And now I've got a build directory. So that's getting better. So let's refresh this again. And let's just see. I'm still not loading. So why is it still not loading? Oh, okay. And then, cool. So the next place to look is when you're registering a block. You have to actually register it. So in your plugin file, there'll be a register block type call, and you're going to need to point it to the correct folder. In my case, I pointed it to the wrong folder, and that's a dad joke, and I will die on that hill. That's fine. So I'm gonna pass it to build, because this is going to look for the block registration in our build directory. It's going to look for that file right there. And if I refresh this, are we going to get there? Are we going to get there? Oh, look at that! Now I see I've got, okay. These blocks are being registered now, so that's good. So I'm kind of there. So let's put one in. So now, oh, there's my debugging blocks. Oh, now what? Okay, now I've encountered an error. This is a terrifying error that doesn't help you in any way, shape, or form. But if you look in your console, you can get a bit of help here. Now, it's important to know that I have script debug turned on. So that's a constant. If you've been working with WordPress for any length of time, you know there are some development constants that you can enable in PHP. For example, I'll show you. So in your WP config file, there are a bunch of these. So I have this set to true. Now, if we set this to false and I refresh this, we will still get console errors, but they'll be a lot less helpful. So you can see, like, this doesn't help. That's just not helpful at all, right? So that's why it's so important to set this to true. Because now that error turns into something that's a bit more readable. You have a call stack. It just gets you where you need to be a lot faster. So if we click on this, we can see, okay, there's something weird going on in here. So let's take a look at my edit in this broken block. And if I look at the edit, I can see, okay, yeah, this is absolutely going to fail because props item.test doesn't exist. So this is saying, okay, this is just completely not a thing. It's going to break. It just fires an error. So that's something to take a look for. There's two ways to fix that: delete that code or add the null coalescing. Is that what that is? No, sorry, optional chaining. So what this is going to say is if this exists and that exists, then we're good. But I'm just going to delete it. Now, okay, so I think we're good. So we have this dangerous looking fake function, but that's still firing errors. So let's see what that is. So if we look, we can see, okay, so our fake function is not a function. Okay, well, that's interesting because I imported it from here, but that doesn't exist. So this is something that happens to me all the time because I try to import a component or a function or a hook or something from the wrong package, and it's not there because this looks totally fine, and your IDE is not going to yell at you. Maybe if you're doing stuff with TypeScript, it will. But basically, that's going to break that. So we'll turn that off and we'll fix it. And now we should be able to get this going. There we go. My block finally works. So the next thing, I'll be super fast, is that this is a static block. And so if I save this content's going to be saved. But what if you have to make a big structural change? So let's say I change all of this to this. So this is a big structural change. right? And then if I refresh this page now, I should get this. So I'm sure everyone on the stream has seen this before. This is a block invalidation error. So you can click that button and it will work. But the thing that I want to point out is in your console again, it's giving you the reason it's not working. And the reason is this. The content that's generated by the save function that we just updated looks like that, which is this very complicated HTML. But the stuff that was retrieved from the post body or the content, because we've already saved this block, looks like this. And because the block editor doesn't know how to resolve that stuff. So if you're just working with this block, like if you're just building this locally, you can just hit a temp recovery and that's fine. If you have to update old blocks, that becomes a little bit more complicated. You can use something called deprecations, which I don't have time to get into, but I highly recommend going and taking a look at that. Or you can use a dynamic block, which doesn't have this problem. You'll never have block validation errors there. Yeah, I think so. That was it. That was my crash course in block debugging. Looks like we got. I'm just a minute over. So do we have questions, or does anyone want me to just do it all again?
Yeah, just start over. Just
do the whole thing again. Okay.
No, that was great. And I think that the debugging thing might look a little bit scary if you're working on a block for the first time. Mm-hmm. But knowing that it's there is important, because like you will run into these errors. You will run into things as you're building and you're messing around, and like it's not as scary as it might seem. And if you kind of run through some of those debugging steps, you'll pretty quickly resolve your issues. All right, so we do have a couple questions. The first one, apart from blocks, can we also expose global settings to APIs? You can write your own custom API endpoints.
Yes, you can do you can do anything that. This is gonna sound like a horrible answer, but yes, you can build your own API endpoints with the REST API. There's lots of stuff that you can do. Doing it in a block may not be the best place to do it. You probably want to do it somewhere else. Mm-hmm. Actually that's not true. You can register endpoints with the plugin associated with the block. Correct. Yeah. But the block itself, you're probably not going to want to do much with. You might ingest those APIs. Mm-hmm. which I've done, but yeah. So short answer is yes, but without context, it's hard to really point you in the right direction.
And it's more advanced than a beginner stream, I guess.
Definitely, yeah.
As someone who's a stickler for coding standards, can you briefly explain how you set up your build process with WP Prettier formatting?
Yes, it's super easy. So because I am using and thank you for asking this question. No one's ever asked me this question, and it warms the cockles of my heart. So something I've never said live. So thank you for that too. So in Node modules, a dependency of the scripts package is the WordPress Prettier config. So I am just passing this to my package.json to use it. And now I have VS Code set up to save to format on save. So if I can show you that, this is going to be very specific to that. So basically, these settings are going to format on save, and that's how I do it. So, which is awesome because I can make the most ridiculously, horribly formatted things, like entirely, like this, and it just puts it all where it should be. So I personally love it. You can do the same with PHP CS as well. PHP Code Beautifier does work. You have to play with it a bit, but yeah, great question. Yeah. Thank you for asking.
And if you're building plugins for the WordPress.org repository, coding standards are very important. So being able to pull those in automatically with just a save is such a time-saving thing.
Mm-hmm.
How do you know what to import and where to import it from? For example, how do you determine what a package is called and where components, elements, or block editor features are located?
One is through experience, but there's also so if you know what you're looking for, it becomes a little easier. If you don't, it's a bit of hit and miss. So sometimes what you can do is what I do this a lot for data stores. I'm going to show another little debugging thing here. So if you inspect the WP Global in the console of your local development site, you will see all of the packages, because all of those packages are converted onto the global. And so, for example, components is here. So if you wanted to look, so if you're like, hey, is there like a button component? Like, let's check. So you can say WP dot components, right? Components, and then you can literally just come in here and search for them. And these are all the component names. And then once you know that, you can go and look at the documentation, because we do have reference guides for the package reference or the component reference. So you can see what's in here. The components are pretty discoverable. Some of them, there are some data store things that are a little bit harder to find, but that approach of using the console is really helpful as well, because you can say you can do data and you can get a select, and you can say what like block editor, and this will give you, that's not a thing. But again, you have to kind of know the name of the store to do it, but you can get a list of all the selectors that are active by doing that. And this is how I found a lot of the more obscure ones that I've used in places. But again, there is references, like the data module references. So you can look by store. So if you want to look in the core store, there's get post types. It's all here. But knowing what the one stumbling block that I had when I first started was knowing what it is, what the thing is. Like, I know what I want to do, but what's it called? Like, how do I find the token form field component, which is like a thing that does a thing that I want to do, but I don't know what it's called. So there's that. Another place to look is on Storybook. Do I have a reference to Storybook? Yeah. So you can look on WordPress.github.io/Gutenberg, and this has got all of the components in place, and you can actually play with them a little bit. So you can see various options. You can see what the properties are and things like that. So there's a few places to find that stuff. Once you start finding it more, and once you start getting into it more, it'll be a bit more like helpful. Also, if you install the packages locally, and you will get some help with from your IDE. If you're doing stuff with TypeScript or not, there is the inspection in there.
Yeah, and I want to, right before we get to the next question, I want to share, like, we always recommend trying to stay as close to core as possible. So, like, what I usually do when I'm building a plugin, and let's say you did the photos thing where you wanted like a little slider. There's a lot of sliders in WordPress core and Gutenberg. So going to Gutenberg and looking for a block, looking up one of the blocks that uses a slider, and just pulling up that code and saying, oh, they're using the range control component. Then you know that component can be used in your plugin. So I really look back at WordPress itself to find design patterns that I can then use in my own blocks. If you use a paid version of ChatGPT or Claude, would you be able to take your JSX code and have it write the PHP render code?
I don't know. Try it.
Probably.
Let me know. Probably. I mean, there are similarities. There's enough similarities between it that if you had an LLM that really understood how to write two languages, you could say convert this to this. I think Cursor, is it Cursor?
Yeah.
And it's good at that. GitHub Copilot's really good at that. I've used it to convert like JSON to like a JSON file to a JSON object, and stuff like that. So I think yes, that'd be interesting. That'd be an interesting little like IDE tool to be able to say just convert this, right?
Yeah.
If you build it, Chad, let me know.
Yeah, exactly.
Because I love it. It's a great,
I mean,
cool idea.
We are very pro AI here. And
yeah.
So like it's especially like when Ryan, I don't know if you used AI, but the fetching the photo thing, I wouldn't necessarily know how to do that offhand. So I'd be like, hey, I want to fetch photos from you get them to write that little function, and then you just dump
exactly.
it. So.
I'm a developer. I'm lazy. I don't want to do anything manually. Well, you've seen me type. If I have to type more than a prompt,
Yeah.
we're going to be here a while.
Yeah. So leverage AI if you can. It's a great tool.
Yeah. Props is not a key reserved word, as far as I know. It's a convention. Attributes. So to clarify, you've seen attributes passed into the component, like into the it's received as a parameter, or is that been destructured from props? Because attributes is a special word in block API parlance that represents the attributes that block stores.
Yeah.
Whereas props is a React term. As far as JavaScript language, I don't believe props is a, well, if it was a reserved word in the JavaScript language, then we couldn't use it. But also, it's a bit like hooks as well. Like hooks are always prefaced with use. That doesn't mean they have to be, but that's just sort of the convention. So I think the answer is no. But I wouldn't use it unless you're using it for props, because it becomes unclear what the purpose of that variable is.
You will see attributes a lot, but it's probably put in 2 curly brackets in there. So that's
So you're doing, yeah. So you're destructuring out attributes from the props that are passed to the component. It's a good question though. Thank you.
All right. Well, I'm not sure if we have any other questions, but I do want to stress is that building blocks can be challenging and scary when you first starting to do it. And so, as Ryan showed in the beginning, that create block tool, we could have probably stopped this stream in the first 5 minutes if the goal was to build a block, right? Because you ran the code, it scaffolded a block, done. It's a boring block. But once you get from that initial block to something really more complicated, that is where things can get quite tricky. We've kind of made it easy for you to scaffold a basic block, but building something really complicated can get it's serious development. It can get quite complicated. But we're here to answer questions and help with that in the community. So please reach out. Is there a starter package for testing blocks?
There is. There is. So the build process, the script package comes with all kinds of testing frameworks kind of built in. There is end testing with Puppeteer and Playwright, I believe, and there's also unit testing. So you can get those. There are some utility packages as well that are available. For Playwright to do things like like navigate to a page, insert a block, that sort of stuff. So they're not super robust. And I think I've answered that question, but my question back to you is, what kind of testing are you looking for? If you're looking for PHP testing, is it integration? Same with JavaScript. You want unit, you want integration. There are tools. All those tools are fully available in the community. There's not like a de facto sort of testing suite for WordPress for blocks, but you can certainly build your own, and all the tools are there. So
absolutely. All right.
Awesome.
Well, just one last push for the documentation. A lot of work's been going on in the last year to kind of improve that getting started type documentation for people who are just getting started. And then, Ryan, you have a stream every week on Thursday where you're talking about building blocks and extending the editor and doing all that sort of stuff. And then we also run twice a month a thing called Developer Hours, where we talk about this stuff in more depth as well. So a lot of different places where you can learn about building blocks. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention that while this conversation is about how to build your first block, WordPress is evolving to a point where it's becoming easier and easier to add functionality without the need to build a block. So we have a new thing called the Block Bindings API. We won't get into that here, but there's a lot of different ways that you can add functionality to core blocks, build your own functionality that doesn't even require scaffolding a block. So I just wanted to put that teaser out there. Perhaps we'll have future sessions on those types of things in the future, but blocks are great. You should all know how to build a block, but there's also additional functionality that you can build that doesn't even require the need for a block.
Yeah. just before we drop off, I just want to link. I do have this Polaroid generator in a GitHub repo. People are welcome to take a look at it and steal it and do whatever they want with it. I'm just going to drop the URL in the chat here. So yeah. Anyways, so feel free to grab that and play with it and change it, whatever, and call it your own.
Ryan, are you able to share the link to? We also have a repository called Block Development Examples. As it's aptly named, it's just a repository full of block examples. So it's also another good place to go check out different types of blocks, how they're built, learn from it. And that is a community repository. So if you have any cool blocks that you want to contribute to the Block Development Examples repository, that's a great contribution and another place that people can go and learn.
Yep, that's great. Looks like there's one last question. Do we have time for the question, or?
Sure. I'm curious to know if WordPress will totally convert their core to JavaScript.
No, not going to happen. Not in my foreseeable future, anyway. I mean, I don't dictate the project, but I can't see that happening. We would be talking about losing 20 years of WordPress goodness out there. Entire hosting companies. It would be a massive thing to do that, and I just don't think it's on the radar. So there's going to be a lot more JavaScript coming down the road, though, like especially in the admin. But it's still going to be, I think, built in PHP for the foreseeable future.
But getting comfortable with JavaScript and React and stuff is an important thing, especially when you're building blocks and that sort of thing, because it is how you interact with the editor these days. So
exactly, yeah. Looks like the link's not showing for everyone because of spam. So we'll put the links maybe in a comment, Jamie, or a description, or we'll put those links up somewhere on this feed.
Great. All right. Well, thank you, everybody, for attending, and stay tuned for more live streams in the future on developer-oriented topics as well as other fun things. I hear that there is a speed build challenge coming up on Friday. Which should be fun. And then Ryan and I are doing one next week. That's where fun. Ryan is building things manually and I get to use AI. So I think I'm totally advantaged. But that should be fun. So that's going to be next week. So stay tuned for more. Any last words, Jamie? Or you're muted.
Yeah, so tune in next week. We've got the AI special coming up with Nick's going to have AI at his fingertips. Ryan's going to have nothing but his human abilities.
Nothing but my wits.
They're going to get an hour, and I think we're going to give them like 10 tasks to do in an hour. So it'll be a fascinating comparison. Nick's been getting very excited about the AI tools he's been playing with. So we'll publicize that, but it's going to be live stream next week. So that will be a fun one. But that's all from us, I think, isn't it? Anything else, guys? Or are we done?
No, just make sure to thumbs up the video and we'll see you next week, hopefully.
Yeah, give it a thumbs up, everyone. That'd be great because it helps spread the word. And thanks for watching. We'll see you all soon. Good night.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.